Hello, everyone, and welcome to the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast. Due to unforeseen circumstances, this show is cancelled. No, I'm only joking. Now, today we're talking about psychics, the psychic arts. Good psychics, bad psychics. Well, I'm joking. There aren't really any good psychics, are there? I don't know, Chris. Are there any good psychics? Are there any good psychics in the world?
Why would you do that to me? That is so cruel.
Ever met any that you trust?
I've met good psychics.
Were they psychics or were they witches?
They.
Oh.
I've met good psychics, not necessarily as in gifted psychics. Should we say that? I've met gifted psychics.
So you've met good psychics that just aren't any good at psychic work. So like they might be good at DIY or something.
No. So I mean, I know good psychics that are good at what they do, not very good at the looking after themselves and get themselves into a lot of trouble. So I know psychics that are good at telling people what they want to hear.
Is that the job of a psychic, to tell you what you want to hear?
I think these days that seems to be what they do.
I thought that it was supposed to tell you what you were asking, like to give you honest answers to your questions. Like Miss Cleo says, you have the questions, I have the answers.
Exactly, but that actually implies that it's their answer. You have a question to ask, and I have the answer you want to hear.
So, are there... Okay, so you said you've met... Well, how many roughly? Have you met one or two good psychics? You know, what would you say?
I can count on the two hands that I've got.
Okay.
That's the ballpark figure I'm
going
to give.
For those of you that don't know, Chris, he's actually only got two fingers on each hand.
No, I do not. I'm telling there's a maximum of 10.
Did you have that prosthetic?
There's a maximum of 10 that I've probably come across in the hundreds of psychics that I have come in contact with. I'm not saying they're all bad. That's not what I'm saying at all. Because, you know, we still have a business to run and they need to turn up because they bring the punters in.
This is true.
But it's not...
I've personally never met a bad psychic.
Yeah, sure.
They're all far too much a goody two-shoes for my liking.
Oh, I see what you did
with
there.
The light.
I see what you did
Always
there.
The light with these.
Yeah.
If you see a light, for crying out loud, please walk towards it.
So, yeah, it's one of those. Before you think it's another one of these W bashing ones, it's not. We're bashing psychics this week.
We're bashing psychics this week. So psychics, much like STDs, which I think you can draw a comparison to.
Okay, come on. I want to hear this
they
one.
come in a lot of varieties, don't they? So what type of psychics? What type of varieties are there?
Are we doing actual classification here, really? About...
Well, I don't know. I mean, if I was to happen across one of those show psychic fairs, what might I see amongst, you know, the tables full of crystals and crushed velvet?
You mean other than their tarot and angel cards?
You've got the angel reader, you've got the tarot, you've got the... It's never medium, it's international medium nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah.
So in all
honesty,
means
they've got a website, I think.
Okay, yeah, basically they're in the clouds. Well, their heads are definitely in the clouds, meeting some of them, most of them, all of them. Then okay, so being specific about psychic work, I suppose we should define what is a psychic, because I've met people that say, oh no, I'm not a psychic, I couldn't do this or that or the other, and it's like, wait a minute, you see dead people and you say you're not a psychic?
Yeah.
It's like, so what is a psychic?
Okay, right. So we have to do classification rubbish, don't we, there, where they love to tell you which type of psychic they are. So the clearest definition you'll get with most people is they either go medium or psychic, don't they?
Yeah. Or nowadays it's psychic medium because of
Yeah,
all the TV shows. I'm a
because they're
psychic
both.
medium, which is basically the same thing.
Yeah. So medium suggests that they are somehow channeling.
They're the middle ground,
They're middle
in the
ground.
medium,
Yeah.
in the middle, stuck in the middle with you.
Yeah. Whereas psychic suggests that they are reading some kind of energy. So that it's not actually in them, it is around or in contact with them. And that they're reading an energy form rather than necessarily channeling anything or receiving messages. They're reading something. So that's kind of
Right.
how I would separate the two. Are you on agreement there?
Yeah, I think I would separate them the same as that essentially. I think what the real separation I don't think is so much in terms of psychic or medium. I think is the subgroups of that people get confused by.
Oh, you mean all the
Because
clairs?
it'll be a case of you not necessarily the clairaudience, clairvoyance, all that. It's a case of when you go in a psychic room, they market themselves as something. So you'll see the mediums market themselves as being able to communicate with the dead.
Yeah.
You'll see the angel readers market themselves as some kind of medium between the angels and this and that. And then you'll get certain ones that go down a kind of Norse thing and they're like, oh, I read the runes and I, deal with that energy, that sort of thing. Surely, if you're a psychic and you're any good, you should be able to do all of that.
Yeah.
Or am I just thinking about witches now?
Yeah.
Because we do it all, don't we?
That's where I tick the boxes for those psychics I know that are good. So the psychics I know that are good like to do what they call the icebreaker routine. So when they have a client, they will have cards out and they'll put cards out and ask the client to pick cards. And then what they'll do is that's the icebreaker. The person that client is coming expecting to see cards on that table or runes or some kind of divination apparatus is there. And those sorts of psychics that I've met will call those kind of their icebreaker routine, where actually they're not reading cards at all. What they're doing is establishing that connection with the client by getting the client to put their guard down by the fact that they've seen cards or they've seen runes or whatever floats that particular client's boat. They'll get that out, and then what they do is switch straight in to a psychic reading of some description or mediumship, depending on which way they go. And you'll find even the mediums a lot of the time will get them to hold their hand or look at some cards or touch a crystal or something in order to actually kind of make that connection. And those are the ones that I tend to have more more respect for, are the ones that openly say, I don't read cards, but I do use them because it makes the client comfortable.
Yeah, but that's just surely snobbery when it comes to, well, I'm not relying on a tool. I can do it all myself. No?
I get that, but at the same time, I don't necessarily have issue with that. What I have issue with is the fact they spend so much time up in the clouds or whoever they're speaking to that they don't maintain proper cleansing practice or grounding practices, which means that they spend so much time connected with other worlds that they forget about they need to keep 2 feet on the ground in their normal life, which is how those psychics end up being our clients.
Yeah. Well, yeah, full disclosure, I suppose quite a lot of our clients for consultations are psychics or professionals that work in the psychic field. So what's the difference between a psychic and a witch when we're talking professionals? So professional psychic, professional witch, what's the difference?
Well, I guess for a witch, psychic ability is just one of those tools in the tool shed or the tool belt. It's a case of they may use reading work or divination or any of those things as a tool when working. So You know, I'm not talking about those insta witches that like to have to do a reading every time they've done a candle spell just to make sure it actually worked rather than seeing the effect. But I'm not talking about those. I'm talking more about the fact that it's another tool. Is it the right day to do this? Am I in the right frame of mind? Is the energy right for me to be working this kind of work? Is that site that I want to set up a sacred space safe? You know, am I about to go and enter different realms with or without protection?
So you'd say that psychics or psychic work is a specific area of magic, then magical practice, psychic work.
I guess so. I would go as far as to say psychic ability is nothing special. Everybody has
No, it's not.
Has the potential to do it. It's part of our chemistry as humans in order to tap into those parts of the brain that allow you to do so. And, you know, it's something that other species take for granted. It's one of those things that they don't rely on speech to do their communicating, and therefore it's second nature to a dolphin to talk to another dolphin without having to, you know, make words. And actually, I think I've pointed out before that I consider language actually a device of separation as opposed to an all-inclusive special aspect of being human. I think that actually most people use words as a way to hide their true intentions. But that's probably a topic for a different situation. However, yeah, I think we kind of tend to talk about psychic gift as if it's some kind of special, based on the fact that we call it a gift, when actually it's something that we can all do. Some are just better at doing it and already come with that feature unlocked.
Yeah, so when it comes to really when you're looking at magical practitioners, not all magical practitioners are created equal. Obviously, some are better and stronger and more knowledgeable, etc., than others. And if psychic work is a field of magic, field within magic, it stands to reason that there's going to be some psychics that are better than others.
Yeah.
Now, I've been accused of hating psychics. I don't know if you think that. But I've been accused. I say some nasty things.
I don't think we hate psychics. We hate the industry.
No.
And what the industry allows people to do.
Yes, definitely dislike the industry. I personally cannot abide incompetence.
Well, no, there is.
So I don't care whether it's a psychic or a witch or what. If you're incompetent at your job, then I dislike it. Mm-hmm. Okay. The problem is there's a lot of incompetency in the psychic trade, so to speak. Now, there's an increasing amount of incompetency, I think, in witchcraft, mainly because there's a lot of people that use the term witch without really fully understanding the connotations of that term and the kind of mantle that goes along with being called a witch and not calling yourself a witch, but that's for another podcast. But in the psychic world and being a professional psychic, what I dislike is the fact that you're someone that's offering a service to someone and you're not fulfilling that service. That's the problem. That's what I don't like. It's incompetency. You're not delivering on the goods.
But is that down to lack of training? Is that down to the way they were taught? Is that down to the fact that they're just not capable of seeing the bigger picture? What are you saying with that? What
it's kind of
about it? How would you fix it?
It's a mixture of all things, okay? So, like, I think of things in terms of, if I'm trying to be black and white about it and simple about it, you know, it doesn't matter if you mess around with something and you're only hurting yourself. if you're painting yourself as some kind of guru or advisor or something like that, and you're messing around with things you don't really understand,
You'd be able to put your money
then
where your mouth is.
there's a danger in that. And I've seen it happen too many times now with the psychic trade that it leaves a sour taste in my mouth. It's just association. I've seen it in witchcraft, but at the same time, I know enough witches to kind of offset that. There's enough really cool, great witches that are really competent, great at magic and witchcraft and that, very knowledgeable, powerful, whatever. In the psychic world, I don't have that. What I generally see, most of the psychics I interact with are people that are incredibly incompetent. And the problem is, it's the incompetent ones that often set up shop.
Yeah.
And it's the incompetent ones that you'll see at psychic fairs and stuff like that. And the problem is, the only people that judge these people are the mundane, the everyday person. And of course, they don't know anything.
But is that not...
So they can get taken advantage of.
But isn't that part of the problem with that down to the fact there is no gatekeeping in psychics, and that actually anyone who's had a go at reading tarot cards can set up shop, whereas most witches would say they don't have enough broad enough knowledge to set themselves up, or because I don't know, because if you put all the insta witches into the group as well, all of a sudden you've diluted that pool quite a lot more.
Yes, that is true. That is true. I think I may have a romanticized view of witchcraft,
I think
perhaps, just because of the fact that I think of it as it used to be and not as it is now. And I think we've rather lost that battle with the repeal of the Witchcraft Act.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, when something's illegal, it just means that the hardcore people keep it going underground, and it's for people that really are devoted to that craft, that thing. Whereas when it's accessible, you get a lot of idiots that are involved, which only kind of are interested. I think the problem with the difference with witchcraft and psychic work is that witchcraft's slightly less accessible. You can buy lots of books on it and that, but that's not actual witchcraft, as we all know. Whereas what the psychics are doing is psychic work. You can't say it's not psychic work. It's just soppy psychic work.
Yeah.
So I could take a witch and look at a witch and what the witch is doing and say, well, that's not really witchcraft for a multitude of reasons. I can't take the psychic and say that's not really psychic work.
Because technically they're doing psychic work, but...
Technically they're doing psychic work and they are being a psychic. They're just being a really rubbish psychic. And it's accessible because most of the people in the psychic industry are either charlatans that have no idea what they're doing and purposefully go out knowing that they have no idea what they're doing, or they're people that rely on natural gifts, so say, quote unquote gifts.
Yeah.
And the problem is the fact that they're over reliant on that. It's the person that's literally was born quite good, got a good pair of legs on them, quite good at running.
Yeah.
And what you're comparing that person with, you're comparing them with someone that's just won an Olympic gold for sprinting. Like, there is no comparison. And when it comes to psychic work and stuff like that, there's some training. However, it's very poor. They've got a lot of, psychic training places, whether it's the Spiritualist Church, whether it's Lily Fail, I think is something like that here in America, all those sorts of things, spiritualists, that sort of thing. It's not very good. Would you agree with that?
Well, of course I'd agree with that, but that's down. But equally, I have seen good people come out of that, and they've just managed. But
they leave it behind.
They've left it behind, and they're doing better.
That's the problem. Yeah.
But that we could say the same about people that were once Wiccans. Like where they've...
What are you saying about Wiccans, Chris?
They
what
can
are you
have...
saying about Wiccans?
I'm just saying it's limiting. And that's limiting in the same way that spiritualists are limiting. Is because the religion part of it is the limiter. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
So it
shrinks your paradigm.
Yeah, so you're limiting that paradigm. Whereas, if you'd come from a witchcraft background and discovered Wicca, you would have had an open paradigm and you could choose to close it if you wished. Whereas, if you've come to it from that point and you've experienced all there is to go and then decide to join Wicca, then that's somebody that's made a conscious decision about it. Whereas the same way if you Christian and then join the spiritualist church and then learn to become, because they still, you know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, it wasn't as rude as you just suggested, is all I'm saying. It was only
we all have
half
our little
Wiccan bash.
bugbears. We have our little bugbears. We have our little bugbears. But I think when it comes to psychic work, in order to explain why we feel this way, I think the only way to illustrate it is with story time, and examples, really. Because the thing is, when I view the witch is like a GP, general practitioner. They know a little bit about everything, and they're competent at a little bit of everything. Not just dabbling. Remember.
And it allows them to kind of troubleshoot a bit more than most psychics that we come into contact with. Because at the end of the day, a lot of them we meet, they're burnt out after a few years of success, quote unquote, and then are burnt out, and that's why they end up with us a lot of the time.
If you look at the medical profession, when you train to be a doctor, you go through medical school and you learn about the whole body. And then you specialize. Psychics don't do that. They are only looking at one very narrow, specific part of the body. So they're looking at psychic work. They're not looking at creation, the universe, all of that sort of thing, how that works in general. They're not talking about magic or understanding how magic works. They're just being essentially a receptacle of information.
What am I doing? How am I doing it?
How to basically fix a problem with a client. So very often they can get into some really dodgy areas in the fact that it's way out of not just their comfort zone, but out of their experience in general. And that's probably the real reason why we get so many psychics, professional psychics, as clients that come to us for consultations, because they've messed something up, because they've not been taught it. They just think, oh, well, I'll just rely on seeing these dead people and speaking to them and that sort of thing, blah, 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 blah. Which, let's be fair, I mean, as above, so below. The world's, somewhat black and white, and up there, down there, wherever you want to think about the other world, somewhat black and white. Not everyone's nice and has your best of intentions, that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, there's not a huge amount that tends to go wrong on a regular basis.
I think you can put most of the queries into two categories. Category one is those that are ungrounded and have spent too much time on other worlds and have lost attachment and wondering why things are going wrong. And then the other category, I think for me, is the ones that make the mistake of using only their own energy, even though they're working for somebody else, which always baffles me as to, like, they get to the end of a session and they're like, oh, I'm exhausted. And you're like, why? Like, when we get to the end of a day of consultation,
we're on a buzz.
We're buzzing. I'm ready to take the world on. And we're trying to find excuses to burn out that energy. Because you're doing client work. So surely if you're reading that person's energy, why are you not using that energy for the work? That's what they paid for.
Well, also, I think the very fact that you, as a psychic, essentially most of what, and that's the difference, there's a difference there as well, is the witch uses energy. They don't just read it, they manipulate it and get their hands dirty with that energy. The psychic is just a receptacle for that, to the point where they'll put more faith in the thing that they're talking to, if they're a medium, than themselves. And that can open up to some massive doors, because you can't always trust everything that's out there. And then also the fact that they don't have a firm grasp, really, because they don't really mess around with creation, with the universe, and how it's structured and stuff, to understand how they even do the things they do.
Yeah.
So they don't really understand how their abilities work.
They just got a gift.
So when it comes to, yeah, they've just got a gift, which is why you hear that so often. And it's like a case of if I've seen psychics try and teach other psychics how to be psychics. Okay, not just from a business perspective, but how to develop their own psychic ability. And they're often terrible at it. Yeah. They master one or two techniques. But if you ask them, how does that technique work?
Well, Grandma told me
how to do it differently. Exactly. They don't understand really what's going on. And the palate, I think, when you look at taste buds and you think of cooking, the witch needs to have a sophisticated palate. They sample and use all of these ingredients, energies, that sort of thing, when manipulating, and tear them apart and understand them. Whereas the psychic's got very often seems to have a less sophisticated palate, to the point where we like to, or I can't say that you
They recognise energy, but don't necessarily can categorize it.
Understand it. Yeah, they can't categorize it and they can't manipulate it either. It's just a case of, I know that there's something there. So I know we're getting near the end of the 30-minute podcast, and that we will definitely go over for the No Holds Barred for the Witchcraft Patreon, of course. But anyway, one little story. So when I was younger, with my friend who shall be nameless, we used to get involved with a lot of paranormal investigation, and we always liked to take the mick out of the psychics, to mess around with them. And we didn't do that by, like some would conjure up scary, demonic, creepy deities or spirits and stuff like that. What we would do is create synthetic spirits. We'd create egregores. We would take something, whether it would be a spoon or a pillow or something like that, something small, just leave it in the room and force energy into it and give that energy a story, a reason for being there.
Yeah.
And it would normally be your stereotypical kind of thing. Oh, this pillow, this old man called Stuart died on it, and his soul's linked to it, and he had such a terrible life on his own, rocking backwards and forwards in this chair waiting to die, blah, 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 blah. Well, the psychic then comes along during these paranormal investigations, and they pick up. They're like, oh, I can feel there's a spirit here. Oh, over there, he's sat in that chair and he's attached to this pillow, blah, 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 blah. No, they can't tell that that's an egregore. They can't tell that that's not a human spirit.
Well, they wouldn't know what an egregore was.
That's the problem. So those people are advising. So it comes to the point which, how much can you trust someone, a professional, that doesn't really understand the energy that it's working with? And I mean, you can talk about healing and stuff like that. We can talk. Let's do an entire episode on Reiki at some point.
Okay.
We'll call it Bachelors Not Included. But there we go. I don't know. I can end up going on a rant. So is there anything you want to say?
I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's one of those. It's the same way in which I have a tendency to test psychics. So I don't fool around in that way, but I will let down a defense enough that if they are sensory enough,
sensitive
enough, that's the word I was after, they will pick up on certain things. And then if they manage to read that much, you let a little bit more out. So, for me, it was always a kind of, because they love their guides. I have particularly, I wouldn't have called them a guide, but what they would call a guide. I have animal spirits that spend some time with me. I've got one particular one that is always loves to test a psychic. And based on whether or not they can tell me what it is, and what it looks like, will base on to how well they are at reading things, and whether or not they can see, or if they can just sense. And those kind of litmus tests that I do, I get probably just as much enjoyment out of as you do with your little egregores. But it's just a case of, you want to know how good somebody is. Now, most people, the mundanes, will base that on how true the information is.
That is very true. And can you believe it? We are out of time.